We're here again today because Mark Carney refuses to disclose his assets and his conflicts of interest. He doesn't understand why the media and why the opposition keep asking questions. Now, every time he's asked about his connections to Brookfield Asset Management or his conflicts, he becomes defensive, he deflects, and then he attacks. Remember what he told all of you and all Canadians after the Liberals' English language leaders debate in Montreal. He said, quote, "I do not have a connection with Brookfield Asset Management," end quote. Now, I'm sure each and every one of you saw his exchange with reporters in London yesterday. Now, did that sound to you like someone who didn't have any connections to Brookfield? And recall what his office said last week, quote, "Despite repeated attempts, Carney's transition team have declined to clarify if the new Prime Minister still possesses any financial interests in Brookfield," end quote. So apparently, Mark Carney doesn't think that Canadians deserve to know before they vote, and apparently he thinks answering questions on this subject is beneath him.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
When he was asked about moving his Brookfield headquarters to America from Canada, he lied. When he's asked about his assets, he says he doesn't have any conflicts, and he attacks the motives of the ones who are asking the questions. But this really isn't about his style of answering questions that are put to him by the media. The question is, why is he so defensive when he's asked? We know from media reports that Mark Carney was very likely owed future bonus payments from the multi-billion-dollar Brookfield funds that he personally set up and that he managed. And these bonus payments are directly tied to the performance of investments that he made at Brookfield. So what else do we know about the specific Brookfield funds set up by Carney? Now, while Brookfield doesn't provide a full list of projects and companies they are invested in, we know they've invested billions into solar panels, wind turbines, infrastructure, heat pumps, alternative fuels, and countless other sectors associated with the so-called green transition. But also important is the question of which companies and industries did Brookfield and Carney bet against, wanting certain sectors to succeed over others. And perhaps most importantly, which countries did Brookfield and Carney bet on, and which did they bet against? Brookfield is not the most transparent company, but they are slightly more transparent than Carney is personally. And through their public filings, we have some hints. Mark Carney was appointed chair in the latter half of 2020 using the most recently available data. For 2021-2023, we can see that Brookfield's reported assets in the United States increased by 23%, and in Canada declined by 4%. That's right, just as Carney moved his headquarters to America while he was chair, Brookfield was investing more in the United States, and they were pulling back in Canada for years. Perhaps this is one of the reasons that Carney is so hostile when he's asked questions. We also know that Mark Carney handed over what he called a, quote, "full and robust conflict of interest management plan," end quote, to the Ethics Commissioner last week. And yesterday, he bluntly denied having any conflicts of interest. So how can somebody claim to have no conflicts when just last week he told the Commissioner he has so many conflicts that he needs a full and robust plan to manage them all? Why won't Carney share his supposed conflict of interest plan with Canadians so that they can see for themselves? Brookfield investments touch on huge areas of public policy: energy policy, environmental policy, industrial policy, taxation policy, and infrastructure policy. Now, I could go on and on. Now, is Carney planning on recusing himself from government discussions and decisions in those areas? Now, some of you might recall Nigel Wright was hired as Stephen Harper's chief of staff 15 years ago. Because of Mr. Wright's prior private sector work, he had to recuse himself, leaving the room entirely when certain files came up. Will Mark Carney be doing the same? Why won't he answer? Now, Mr. Wright was a staffer carrying out the direction of elected officials. Carney, as Prime Minister, well, he's the chief decider. This so-called blind trust of his, it doesn't protect him. Why? Because these aren't stocks or ETFs like normal Canadians have that a trustee can buy and sell freely. No, he raised the money from international billionaires and made the investments. He knows exactly what is in there. And those Brookfield funds are locked in with long-term contracts. The only people blind to Carney's assets and conflicts are Canadians because he refuses to tell them the truth.
Well, we're waiting.
Mark Carney is twisting himself into a pretzel, trying to hide his assets and conflicts from Canadians, avoiding answering questions. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much attention Mark Carney has been paying to Canadian politics over the last decade, but conflict of interest, it's a serious thing. The Carney-Trudeau Liberals have been repeated violators of conflict of interest laws. Justin Trudeau, twice himself. If Mark Carney's going to go to Canadian voters and ask for a fourth Liberal term, he needs to be transparent. And he could do that today. We're calling on Mark Carney to immediately disclose all of the assets that he put into his blind trust and releasing his, quote, full and robust conflict of interest management plan, end quote. If Carney has nothing to hide, he should have no problem doing so. We know that he has them on file. Get it done today. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Mr. Barron, what is your party's relationship with the provincial counter-party? Like, what is the federal Conservatives' relationship with Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives? Is it a good relationship?
You know, we have a working relationship with anyone who shares our priority to put Canada first. The plan that's been laid out by Mr. Poilievre with respect to provincial jurisdiction, breaking down interprovincial trade barriers, any of the premiers who are prepared to work collaboratively with us on that will find a great partner in Conservatives. The same is true with mayors for cities who are prepared to get rid of the red tape and bureaucracy that's driving up development charges, driving up the prices of homes. So we're ready to work in good faith with partners across Canada who are ready after 9 years of these Carney-Trudeau Liberals to put Canadians first.
Conflict of interest. What are specifically the conflict of interest that you are worried about, and how would that impact Canadians?
So things like the carried interest funds that will see payments made to Mr. Carney based on the performance of these funds are something that should concern all Canadians. Mr. Carney built these funds. He was the one who went out and solicited the investments for it. And so these aren't something that once in a blind trust, though the trust is being managed by someone else. Who is managing it, we don't know. But though it's being managed by someone else, they can't simply just sell these assets as they would in a regular stock portfolio. These are locked in with long-term contracts. So Canadians need to know what is the benefit that Mr. Carney stands to gain from funds like those.
Which one are you concerned about?
Well, we've listed the three funds that Mr. Carney has, these global transition funds, 1 and 2, the catalytic fund. These are ones built by Mr. Carney, and he knows what's in them. And all of these funds touch on areas that are regulated federally or will be impacted by decisions that he can take. So the question is Mr. Carney going to recuse himself? Is he going to absent himself from discussions and decisions anytime these issues are raised? And what's more, is he prepared to properly divest them? Because simply placing them into a blind trust, as some people have pointed out, is more of a Venetian blind because he's able to see in.
There's
There's a process underway with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner's Office, and it's their responsibility at this point, as I understand it, to take the information that Mr. Carney has given them and then to provide him with advice. Does he need to recuse himself? What does he need to disclose to Canadians? What does he need to divest? Do you have faith in that office and its ability to do its job?
So the problem that we have right now is that while that advice is being developed, is we have Mr. Carney, who's taking international meetings, setting national policy, and making decisions, signing orders with his black Sharpie, as we saw the other day. And what is the impact on his personal wealth, his personal investments as a result of that? Are we simply to be satisfied as Canadians that someone can be the Prime Minister of this country and be the only public official, the only public office holder in Canada who doesn't have that public disclosure? Not only is Mr. Carney the Prime Minister, he is currently the least transparent public office holder in Canada. Simply saying that, well, there's a 60-day timeline. He had the opportunity at the outset of the process when he was seeking to become the leader of the Liberal Party, where he could have disclosed this information to Canadians. Why is it that he must wait for the maximum amount of time that's statutorily allowed to him? Why won't he simply be transparent with Canadians and provide them with the confidence that their Prime Minister is acting in the best interest of Canada and not his own best interest? And what's the evidence that Mr. Carney will put his own profits ahead of Canadians? Well, just take a look at his decision. When he had the opportunity to send a message as the chair of Brookfield Asset Management to keep its headquarters in Canada, to keep it proudly Canadian. And what did he do? As he noted in his letter to shareholders, in the interest of higher profits for himself, for his board, and for their shareholders, he moved it to Donald Trump's hometown in New York City, and he sent that letter urging all of the shareholders to ratify the unanimous decision of his board, of which he was chair, in order to ensure their profits. When did that letter get sent? Within a week of Donald Trump saying that he was going to attack Canada with unjust and unjustified tariffs.
Were you surprised to see his snippiness yesterday?
You know, the way in which Mr. Carney answers the questions, as objectionable as it might be, isn't the paramount issue. It's the fact that he's refusing. He's distracting from the real problem here, and that's the lack of transparency. The lack of transparency from someone who, when pressed by media, one of his few times that he's taken questions from the media since he entered elected politics or running for public office, and he lied. He lied about his role at Brookfield. And so not only can we not simply take him at his word, we now need to question what his motives are. And you know, and if you look at what he said on Friday here in this building, when he said that they were going to eliminate the carbon tax, and then yesterday he says that's what he says here in Canada, and then yesterday he's in Europe and he says we need to have a carbon tax in place in order to trade with other countries, which is simply not true.
Okay, officially speaking, he had 60 days to disclose the information to the ethics commissioner, which he's done. So I'm wondering, like, speaking rules-wise, is it the rules that you want to change since he's officially abided by them?
Yeah, so we've said that the rules absolutely need to change. We couldn't have imagined a scenario when Conservatives put in place this conflict of interest regime following what was then the most corrupt government that Canada had seen with the Chrétien-Martin Liberals. Well, we've now emerged from 9 years of the Carney-Trudeau Liberals, and we see a series of ethical law-breaking and scandals that have really tested and challenged the laws as they exist. So yes, the laws need to be updated. Well, of course, that this is something that reporting timeline would need to change. It would be required for leaders who are running, people who are running for the leadership of these parties. But it begs the question, why do we have to appeal to the lowest common denominator? Why is it that Mark Carney isn't simply willing to just be transparent with Canadians? He knows today what those conflicts are. He knows what is in that robust plan. why not simply take the information that is going to be disclosed, like it is for all public office holders? You can take a look at any public office holder in the, you can take, well, a couple of things. First of all, I can tell you before I file my disclosure, based on reading the rules, exactly what's going to appear in the public registry. So it's black and white. It's not a discretionary matter. There's things that will be publicly disclosed and things that won't be. There's also things that are conflicts of interest that will present, and whether or not you need to recuse yourself from those decisions might be a precision that you need to discuss with the Ethics Commissioner. But look, this is the Prime Minister of Canada. How is it that he's expected to lead discussions, to take decisions, to chair the cabinet in this country, and he's got to leave the room when anything on taxation, anything on transportation, anything on energy, on green technology is discussed in the room?
Nothing to see here, please.
When anything on taxation, anything on transportation, anything on energy, on green technology is discussed in the room, because that's what's invested in these funds that he's going to be effectively taking a commission on, getting payments on, based on the performance of those funds. So why doesn't he simply just tell Canadians what he stands to gain from those funds? It's basic transparency. So every other public official can tell you what appears in their disclosure, and you can go and you can look online. But we also know, through a very basic reading of the rules, what is going to be publicly disclosed. Disclose that, but also what his plan is. So why is it that we have to wait the 60 days to read it? Because what's going to happen in that time? There's going to be an election. And in the meantime, Mr. Carney continues to take decisions. He continues to set policy for this country, and even projecting into the future after the election. It's basic transparency. It's incumbent on a Prime Minister, and he should do that, especially when he's leading a party that includes a cabinet who have members who have been found guilty of breaking the very law that he claims to hold so important that he's going to appeal only and meet only the minimum standard. Canadians expect more than the minimum standard from a Prime Minister. Mr. Carney should do better.
I still don't understand what you think he's going to do if he has those conflicts of interest, for example.
Yesterday,
You're not...
Mr. Polyev said that he would use technology to replace it. What details are on that? What kind of technology? How much is that going to cost compared to the effect of industrial carbon tax? Plus, it's not a policy, so what details do you have on this?
Yeah, I think that Mr. Polyev's announcement yesterday stands for itself. I know he took questions on it. You can expect in the next week that we expect that we'll be into an election, and there'll be detailed policies, including on our environmental plans. We've talked in the past about making sure that we invest in nuclear technology. We've talked in the past about making sure that when it comes to actual emissions, that we're displacing global greenhouse gas emissions, punching above our weight as Canada has been able to do in so many other areas. But by exporting our clean and ethical natural gas, our clean and ethical oil to other markets than the United States, in addition to that trading relationship. Look, we've had the opportunity in the past, had we as a country built the capacity, the ability to export natural gas on our West Coast and on our East Coast, we could have displaced dirty oil, unethical natural resource products from other countries. You look at the deal that the U.S. just struck with Japan. You look at our allies in Eastern Europe who are forced to use the natural gas from Vladimir Putin while he wages illegal invasions. How much could we do to displace global emissions with our clean natural resources from this country, and what could we do to build on international friendships and partnerships and other trading relationships by making those products available? So there's a lot for us to do. There's much that hasn't been done under the 9 years of the Carney-Trudeau Liberals, but we look forward to giving you more information we expect in the next week. Thanks so much for your questions today. Thank you very much.